Okay. Okay. Take two. Good morning. It is Tuesday, December 17th, 2024. It is 9:01 a.m. This is a special meeting of the Jefferson Public Utility District Board of Commissioners. My name is Jeff Randall. I'm president of the board, and I'm calling this meeting to order. Jefferson PUD will be offering both virtual online meetings as well as in-person meetings, unless advance notice is provided. Online participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak. And if you're calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise a hand to request to speak. So let's do a roll call. I'm Jeff Randall, Commissioner for District 1 and President of the board.
Kenneth Collins, Commissioner, District 2.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3.
Okay, we are present, all present. So we have an agenda with 2 items, interviews for 2 consultant firms, and then an executive session at the end. Do we have any changes to that, or are we good? Okay.
I'll make the motion to accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor of approving the agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. All right, we have an approved agenda, and it looks like the first consultant is Kate Henson with GMP. So who would like to kick this off?
Be happy to kick it off. So we have our second executive search firm here today to present their proposal to the board. We have GMP Consultants, and Greg Prothman is here with his team. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And Greg, I haven't had a chance to meet your other 2 team members, so I'll let you introduce them and I'll pass it over to you if you're ready.
We are indeed. Thank you, and I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. I'm Greg Prothman. Let me start by introducing our 2 team members. Kate, I think you're there. Do you want to introduce yourself and your background, please?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Greg, and a pleasure to be here this morning with everyone. My name is Kate Hansen. I'm the operations manager for GMP, and my background is I'm a project manager by trade, and over the last 2 decades, I've worked in private business, nonprofits, and government. On the government side, I have actually served as both an administrator and an elected official as well. And I'm excited to be here today, speaking with you folks about how GMP can help you with your general manager search.
Kate's being modest. She's also a fire district commissioner right now, so with her local fire department. Dave, I know you're here also. You want to say hi?
Yes, good morning. Dave Zabel, and I'm a senior consultant with GMP. I've been with them about 2 years, helping on recruitments and doing some custom work for individual public agencies. I have a 42-year career, much of it as a city manager or public works director, all in Washington State. Also, by coincidence, I spent 14 years as a special purpose district commissioner over at Mukilteo for a utility commission. So looking forward to the opportunity to talk this morning about your search.
Great. Well, thank
Greg,
you.
we do have Brenda on as well.
Oh, Brenda, Brenda, I didn't see you there. Please, my apologies. Brenda, could you introduce
Maybe on the
yourself?
second screen.
Yeah.
I'm Brenda Gapatis. I am a project manager with GMP Consultants. I've been with them for about 2 years now as well. In my background, I've worked with within the public sector, both locally in local government and also globally as well. And I'm excited to help you with this search.
Thanks, Brenda. I appreciate that. And my apologies. I didn't realize you'd gone on the call. So this is your team. If selected, this will be the team you'll be working with. By way of introduction, GMP is a public sector executive search firm. We work only in the public sector. Our clients have ranged all the way from Minnesota down to California and virtually every state in between. We typically do between 80 and 100 executive searches a year. So we're quite busy. We have 19 people in the firm currently. For today, I thought if, depending upon time and I thought we would go through the work program and our approach and talk a little bit about how we would conduct the search and the steps involved with it.
And let me just ask you real quick,
Sure.
if you'd like to take questions during or like us to hold questions, or how would you like to proceed?
Whatever you're most comfortable doing, we're happy to answer questions throughout the process. I think sometimes that interactive process is more valuable because questions arrive at that point and we can stop and answer them and maybe add a little more detail to the presentation. So yeah.
Okay, sounds good. And I find it helps to allow for clarifying questions as you're going along, just so we understand specifically what you're talking about. So please
Sure.
proceed.
Anything so far that's come up you want to ask about before we get going?
So, Greg, Ken Collins, who would be the lead on our project?
Dave is going to be your lead. Dave, well, you have two leads actually. Dave Zabel, and he'll be your consultant. Brenda will be your project manager. And those would be the two that would be interacting with most. However, Kate may also pop in from time to time, as she's wont to do.
Thank you.
You bet. So that's a great segue. Thank you for that, because why don't we start with Dave? Do you want to start with describing the work program and your approach and the information gathering phase?
Yeah, so really appreciate the opportunity again to speak this morning. So we have a pretty unique process, I think, and one of those is being on the scene there. So I would like to spend a day or two with the commissioners, with whatever key staffs identified or key stakeholders. We would learn as much as we can about, and I appreciate the documentation you'd sent at the onset here prior to the meeting, but and that's the kind of information we want. What are we looking for in terms of the ideal characteristics for a new GM? And then what are the key issues that are facing the district? Challenges, opportunities, we call it. And I will tell you from the searches that I've done, a really good description of that is incredibly helpful and really attracts the right kind of candidates. I mean, what we don't want is we don't want people fixated on salary or the title or things like that. We want them focused on what can I do to help this agency move forward. And so those are the kind of folks we really try to zero in on, not only those that are qualified, but those that have done that kind of work or suited for that kind of work or excited about that type of work. So we do a thorough job, I feel, of getting to know those kind of issues and from both the elected officials' perspective as well as the uh, perspective of key staff and stakeholders.
Yeah, as Dave said, he's going to want to spend at least a day, maybe 2 days on campus. We want to meet with the commissioners both corporately as a group, but also individually. We want to spend time with each of you. Would love to, if it's possible, to meet with your leadership team. I'd like to meet with your union representatives, and any other stakeholders, other governmental partners you work with, anybody that you think that would be helpful for us to have a better understanding of what those skills, talents, and abilities are that you're looking for in your next general manager. Because all of that information is helpful for Dave then, as Dave could go out and select probably a qualified candidates tomorrow, but they may not be a good fit for you. Part of what Dave needs is to hear is really what makes it unique to work at Jefferson PUD and why you choose to live in that part of the world. I mean, there's reasons, and those are the things that we want to unearth and to be able to then move into the position profile.
Hey, Greg.
Yeah.
Commissioner Tupper, clarifying question. I assume you mean our shop stewards when you talked about labor?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, they're an important component of your organization, so we want to make sure we hear their perspective too, I think. Other questions? Okay. Kate, you want to pick up from there?
Absolutely. Thank you. So yes, after Dave completes his stakeholder interviews, we are going to go into the next phase of our profile development. And in addition to the information that Dave is able to obtain from meeting on site, we will be collecting some additional information from you folks. And then we will pass all of that along to Sarah Marsh, who's our content designer. She's a published author and a great designer. And so she will be coalescing all of that information into a profile. That's what we will utilize as our marketing materials out there to candidates. So she will put together a profile that includes information about the community, why someone would want to come apply for this position, as well as the organization and the position specifically, mostly based off of that information that Dave's going to collect, like he said, the challenges and opportunities and additional information about what you're looking for in a candidate, so that as we're going through our screening, we're really attracting candidates that are meeting what you're looking for and going to be someone who's going to be more likely to be a good fit for your agency.
Once we get the draft position profile completed, we then shoot it back to you for review. This is a critical step because we want to make sure we're all on the same page. Once you've had a chance to look at the position profile, make any changes, tweaks, things of that nature to make sure we're exactly spot on, we now know what we're looking for, and we're now correlated with you and your judgment also. So we're both agreed for what we're hoping to find in our next ideal candidate. And then we can now move to marketing. And Kate, you want to pick up from there?
Sure, absolutely. I'll just say, any questions on any of that so far from folks?
No, please continue.
Great. So then once we have that approved profile and we're all on the same page, we will move into marketing the position. And we do that in a variety of ways. So we will be pushing that position profile and as an advertisement out to multiple job boards. What we included in our proposal is an example. Through our conversations with you, we will hone in more specifically on exactly which job boards we would like to be using. But for a position such as this, we will be focusing on ones such as American Public Works Association, American Water Works Association. We oftentimes use government jobs, as well as pushing it out on our GMP website and LinkedIn network. In addition to that, we will send out an invitation to apply letter, which is sort of a mini version of our profile. It's only a 2-page, but meant to get something physically in front of folks. And we will send out about 500 to 800 letters of invitations to apply to general managers in the Western US. And then we will also do email outreach and send out that same invitation to apply electronically to our email list, which has over 1,000 public works professionals on it. So we will do that. And then one thing that's not listed on here, but is absolutely something that we'll be doing, is Dave will be reaching out within his network and within the experience that he has with recent searches to any specific individuals that he knows of that he think may be a good fit for you folks, to encourage them to apply as well.
Our goal here is that anybody in this industry in our target area should know about your opening and be aware of it, and at least understand, what the advantages are of applying. That's our goal here.
Absolutely.
Right. From that, we're going to get a preponderance of resumes coming in. And Kate, maybe you can talk briefly about what the application process looks like for an applicant.
Absolutely. So we have as well then, once we start receiving applications, we're going to request a cover letter, resume, and professional references from these folks, and they will fill out an application as well that's a part of our system when they apply. So we will collect all of those application materials, and that's what Dave is going to do his initial screening off of, based off of what you're looking for that we've determined in that profile. And then once we hit our first review or closing date, oh, someone has a question. Yes.
Hi. I don't see among the organizations that you're targeting the group called Enrica, which is covers the world of cooperatives. And I wondered, is there a reason why it's not there, or is that just oversight, or is there rationale for not also canvassing the world of cooperatives?
There is not a specific reason that is not there. No, this was what's out there is an example list. So absolutely, if that's something that you folks are open to having cooperatives included in there, we would be more than happy to include that, and any other appropriate outlets that we can include in there for sure. So yeah, that absolutely is something that we can reach out to.
I will just, if I could jump in, that's something that the project manager, HR, your staff and myself will have a conversation about is the outreach and making sure we're hitting all the agencies, all the associations that you feel would be valuable beyond the ones that we've identified. So as Kate said, that was kind of an example. It wasn't necessarily here's the plan for this specific recruitment.
And Dave, this is Melanie. I'm the HR director here. I'm happy to work with if you're selected for this, I'm happy to work with the team too and give you some more trade specific job boards that we typically use.
This is Commissioner Tupper. I have another question too, and I'm gonna ask all the applicants the same question, and that is your familiarity. Obviously, you've worked a lot with municipals and publics here in Washington, it sounds like, so I would expect that you're familiar with Washington's revised code with RCW 54 that governs PUDs and the different structures within how the organization runs, responsibilities of general managers and commissioners and that sort of thing. Are you familiar with that? Because that's something I think would be important as you craft whatever you're going to send out into the universe here for applicants, that's something that they should also be aware of. So are you familiar with that RCW?
Dave, you want to take a shot at that? Since you worked with.
Actually, let me just, if I could, we certainly are. We've been working with not only electrical
Utilities.
special purpose districts, but other special purpose districts across the state too, water, sewer, library districts, those type of things. And I did want to share, and I was going to probably throw it in a little bit later in terms of the advertising plan, but I think this is helpful here too, is we just, and it was for a city of Lake Loveland, Colorado. We just completed a search for utilities director, which is a very independent operating position in that particular structure. And it was electrical generation, water, sewer, treatment on both sides, and broadband. So very similar array of services to what the PUD is offers its customers out there. And we had a very excellent, I think, response from the candidate pool. We had candidates from California, basically across the nation, pulled in. Our finalists were from, I think, 3 from Colorado and 3, including the alternative from out of state. So it was, there's a lot of interest in this kind of a position. And I think what really kind of interested me was how excited the candidates were with the diversity of those services. They weren't all equal. Electrical was the big one there, electrical, water, sewer, but their broadband's growing, et cetera, et cetera. But it drew some real interesting, very capable candidates. I think we can do that here for you too.
So back to your original question, Commissioner. Have I read that RCW recently? No. Are we very familiar with the concepts of those? Do we work in those contexts every day of the week when we do work like this? Yes. If I need to review it again, we will. But I feel confident that I think we understand the basics of that relationship between the general manager, the commissioners, and the PUD.
Thank you.
And I would just throw in there, I'm very familiar with 52 for fire districts as I'm working under that, and happy to step in and help out with any familiarity that we need to make sure our team has as far as RCW 54 for public utility districts.
Any other questions?
No, please proceed.
So once we get a group of candidates, now it's time for us to go to work and to start doing the review process. And Dave, you want to pick it up from there and talk about the process you use for interviewing and the kind of product you produce out of that?
Sure, yeah. So Kate talked a little bit about the kind of materials we get. And so the next step, sorting through all those, because we'll get any number of candidates with less than minimum qualifications in a position. And so sorting through those, getting those down into a reasonable group that meets the minimum qualifications. I'm fairly generous on that because I want to talk to people. I want to make sure that you're getting folks that, maybe they didn't do a good job representing themselves on paper, but they could really bring a lot to the table. So that's that next piece is interviews. I spent about an hour with them, and I will use questions that I've developed that are specific to what you're looking for. The document that you had sent for preparation, and for instance, of this interview, as well as what we work through and develop in terms of a profile for you, and kind of press them on their ability to meet those different challenges and opportunities that might be unique to you, their experience acting as an executive, whether in that executive role or a senior management role, and try to assess their ability to be successful in your position, their ability to get along with folks, their ability to manage at that executive level, to work with unions, work with senior management. At the end of that process, I have a pretty good summary of where folks are at, try to rank them, not necessarily above each other, but sort of grade them basically on a 1 to 10 scale. And then I will work with HR or whoever the board designates, or the board themselves, and whittle that list down to a list of finalist candidates. So we'll have a group of maybe, out of 40 applications, maybe you're going to get 15 to interview. Out of that 15, maybe there's 8, 9 of them that are really, I think, pretty promising and kind of hit the mark where it comes to the agency. Some of them are barely above the pass line. Some of them may be, 10 isn't a high enough number. Sit down, talk to staff about that, talk to the commission about that ultimately, and whittle that list.
Yeah, at that point, Dave, we're going to present the board with that entire list.
Yeah, we'll bring that entire list to the board, whittle and share with the board our observations on each of the candidates, the rankings, the justifications for the rankings. You'll have a full packet with at least their preliminary background things, which includes a Google search, so we kind of know what's out there, what folks have been saying online and so forth. It could be an issue, what news articles might be about out there about them on their past experiences at other employers. And so you have a pretty good sense of who these candidates are. The board can then whittle down, and the process is to kind of facilitate the board whittling that down to a number that you want to actually invite as finalists, whether this can be 4 or 5, maybe 3. I mean, it just depends on the quality of the candidates and the kind of time the board wants to put into it. And then we
Dave,
work
I
with
believe
those candidates. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just because I believe Commissioner Collins has a question.
Which I do. Thank you. Dave, could you talk a little bit about how you go through the process of assessing candidate competency?
Oh, that's a core question, isn't it now?
I guess.
Yeah, it really is.
I think there's a lot of, obviously there's a lot of factors in that. And one is their work history. First of all, the type of work they've been doing and its comparability to this position, and what their success have been. They have been jumping around every year and a half or 2 years, those type of things. What were they able to accomplish during the time they were there? And then I learned from my interview with them, I can kind of probe those, what's on their resumes, and I can kind of probe where their successes have been, what they might have learned, where things maybe not went as well, what they learned out of that process. And it's not a 10 question and answer thing. I really kind of dig in and push these candidates a lot, because you're going to. So I kind of feel part of my job is getting as much of that out now as I can, so we can learn where their weak points are, where their strong points are, how they relate, how they handle getting questioned even, tells you a lot about a person, and their takeaways from their successes, their takeaways from their failures, again, tell you a lot. And my ability to be able to share that with the board when we are going through the review of each of these candidates, I found to be pretty valuable for the board or the council, whatever the case may be.
Just
Thank you.
To summarize a little bit, commissioners, you're going to get ahead of time with plenty of time to review all of the applicants' information that we interviewed. We can make available all of the other applicants that applied. If you are needing some nighttime reading and you're feeling somewhat, you need to read some stuff that's really not relevant, we can get that to you, no problem. But we found that what's most relevant is getting the information to you that the people we interviewed. We're going to present that in a way that's easily digestible, because we're going to provide you with a summary sheet that lists all candidates that we've interviewed, with the ones at the bottom we think that aren't particularly skilled, moving all the way to the top of the ones we think are really the rock stars. We use a 1 to 10 scale. That's only because that's how we keep track of it. And it's pretty simple to use. It's not particularly sophisticated, but it gives us a good indication. And you'll notice that also that you're going to find two designations by each candidate, either recommended or not recommended. If they're recommended, we're going to offer our 18-month guarantee on any of those candidates. If they're not recommended, those are ones we won't offer the guarantee on. As a board, you're obviously free to select anybody you want. It's your agency. But we do find that 99% of the time, boards agree with our assessment and will select, let's say we have 7 or 8 that are recommended. You may pick 4, you may pick 5, you may pick 6, or whatever number you like to bring into final interviews. But that's your decision. We are just providing you that recommendation at that point. So, Dave, anything else you want to add?
No, I think I've pretty well covered it. Yeah.
Okay. You know, Dave brings a wealth of public works experience. He's probably undervaluing his contribution here. What we found in Loveland is that board really appreciated his insights and was instrumental in them deciding on who to select and leading to a successful selection. Now, Brenda, I think you're the one that would be transmitting the information to the board. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you do there?
Yes, of course.
Guys, can you hear us?
Yeah.
We have a question. Melanie has a question.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Dave, this is Melanie. When you receive these applications, do you use your own applicant tracking system, or do you typically have the client use their own ATS?
We use a program called Applicant Stack that we have used for years, and it's how we communicate back with the applicant. Whenever an applicant applies, they immediately get a response through Applicant Stack, and they get notified of every stage of the process through Applicant Stack also. So we stay in close communication with all of our applicants to make sure they're fully informed as to where they're at in the process. Probably a little more information than you wanted, but that's how we use it.
Thank you. No, I just had a question about the logistics of that.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Wonderful. Well, I will discuss some of the things that will happen after those candidate interviews. So Dave has done his candidate interviews, and then we go into the next phase where we are gathering all the information from the candidates as well as the information from those interviews. Our goal is to provide thorough information on each of the most promising candidates. And we do that by providing packets of information to you. One of the things that you will be given prior to the work session, and the work session is a meeting that we'll have with you to go over this information. But some of the things you'll get prior to that work session is candidate packets. Those candidate packets consist of the candidate's cover letter, resume, supplemental questions we'll have them fill out, as well as Dave's consultant notes on how those interviews went. And we also do conduct, as it was stated before, an internet search on each of those promising candidates. So we will make sure to have all that information gathered into one cohesive packet for you to review on each candidate. As well as Greg had mentioned that we will put together a summary sheet, and this sheet will have all of those candidates that had an interview. It gives a brief background of them and a brief summary on how their interview went and whether or not they are recommended or not recommended. And as was stated before, that if you are wanting any other information, we are able to help provide that for you at this stage before that work session.
So one of the things that'll happen also at the work session is, in addition to selecting the finalist candidates, the board will also begin designing the final interview process. And whether you use advisory panels, any one of a number of opportunities that we would use, perhaps using reception the night before to get to know the candidates more informally, having advisory panels to give you insights as to the strengths and weaknesses of candidates. We have a lot of different opportunities we can discuss with you as what's worked well and maybe what has not worked well in the past. But ultimately, that's your decision as to how you want to structure your final interviews. And then we also start talking about candidate travel if we have out-of-state candidates and how to begin coordinating that. So then we have about a 2-week period from the final interviews, or for the work session until the final interviews. And again, Kate and Brenda, you have a lot of work that happens behind the scenes. Do you want to talk a bit more about that? And Brenda, do you want to take the lead on that?
I sure can. Yeah, so during that 2-week period, we call that final interview preparation time. During this preparation time, we will conduct reference checks. We will ask each of those finalists to provide 6 professional references, and I will reach out to all of those references individually to obtain information on them, as well as we will conduct background checks on each of those finalists. Background checks include education verification, history of their driving record, as well as their criminal history, and they will do a sex offender check as well. As Greg had mentioned, I will work with each of those candidates to help facilitate their travel, make sure they have the needed information as far as if they need to book airfare, hotels, car rentals. I will work with those candidates to help obtain that as well. We'll work together with our client to design a interview schedule that will fit best for you. We can adjust this schedule however you guys want your interviews to look, and we will provide that to both. We will make sure the candidates get that. As well as part of this phase is Dave can help develop any interview questions to help during those final interviews. And anything else that might need to be coordinated for those final interview times, we'll take care of during that 2 weeks.
Great.
If I could jump in, so, on the interview questions, we can gear those to the panel. If you have a stakeholder panel or if you have a senior management panel, they're going to have specific interests they may want answered in their assessment of those candidates and their recommendations to the board. So we can kind of tailor questions for those specific panels or for the board itself, if that's helpful.
And a lot of times, we'll ask the board, what areas do you want to measure? And we can craft questions around that.
I think the one other piece, Greg, if I could jump in real quick too, is during this period of time, we stay in pretty close contact with the finalist candidates too, to make sure they're staying focused on the position and the market we're in. There's a lot of competition out there, and so we want to make sure we're reaching out, we're touching these folks to keep them on board, keep their interest high, make sure they're feeling comfortable with where the process is going as well.
Yeah, Dave touches on an important component in some of the frustrations we've been having, I think, in today's market. It's if you select 6 finalists, I anticipate 1 or 2 will drop out when it comes time for the final interviews. It drives me nuts that you would think that after all the time and process you go through and talking with these folks that they'd be to the point where if they get selected as a finalist, they're going to want to interview. But that seems to be where the rubber meets the road for their final decision point. And if I've had one, like I said, frustration is seeing candidates dropping out at the last minute. But as Dave points out, we mitigate that by staying in touch with them as much as possible. Phone calls, just checking in with them, taking their temperature, seeing how they're feeling, and going from there. And that does help. So once we get into the final interview process, Dave will be there to help facilitate the entire process. We'll be there for the entire day to help facilitate. He'll probably sit with the board to help them and help facilitate. At the end of the day, we'll bring all of the advisory panels in. We'll help facilitate a debrief from each of those panels to the board. And then at that point, the board goes into executive session and begins to discuss the merits of each candidate and see if there's somebody that might be emerging as someone you want to talk with further. We can help facilitate that process also. Oftentimes, I've seen where you might want to bring two candidates back and have additional conversations. You might want us to do a little more reference checking on a particular candidate. Or maybe there's just a clear-cut winner and we might want to work on compensation elements and talk about having to form an offer, a letter of offer. We're here for you through that entire process. And then whatever else we have to do in terms of follow-up. We can help facilitate the final interview process and get into eventually to a yes by both parties. So really, that is about a 90-day process, give or take a week or two for vacations and scheduling. Really, let's see if there's anything else we want to cover at this point. So anything else on the process? Any questions on the process at this point?
Questions?
Yeah.
Neither eye. Looks like Ken has one.
I do. I've not heard mention, and I didn't see a reference in the material you sent out regarding the use of a personality test, which seems to be something that other firms emphasize. And I wonder, do you have any particular feelings about the use of that kind of instrument?
I have used those in the past a number of times over the years and have found them to bias to some degree the decision makers' decisions based upon their own personal preference and their like kinds of personalities. There's been a lot of case law that we cannot select on those. Those are indicative of just of a person's tendencies. After a lot of thought and a lot of trial and error, I've concluded that I don't think they're value added to the point where I think I would recommend it as part of the process. I think it's better used. I'm a city manager by training, okay? I managed cities for years. I've found those personality tests are better at helping my directors work better together, understanding their strengths and their weaknesses and things of that nature. But no, this was a conscious decision not to include those in this process. We have found that our process, we've probably conducted over 600 searches in my time in the industry. And I find the process that we're presenting to you today has worked well and has been an evolutionary, product and one that I have a ton of confidence on to offer such a large guarantee. And have decided I didn't want to use the personality test as part of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good questions. Any other questions on process? So moving on to our references, you'll see that we've given you 4 references. We would encourage you to call them if you haven't already. We're very proud of the work we do, and these are a wide variety of folks that I think that can give you an insight as to how we operate and our strengths and the kind of product we bring to the table. So please, if you have a moment, call our references, please. We're happy to propose those to you.
Greg, you mentioned the city of Loveland was sounds like the public works director that oversees the electric utility and other utilities. Could you touch on what positions were hired for each one of those other 3?
Yeah, Loveland was director of utilities. Brainerd was also utilities director in Minnesota. Woodinville Water and Sewer, of course, was a general manager there. And Sue's Creek Water and Sewer, we've done both a general manager and an engineering manager.
Thank you.
You bet. The engineering manager is a PE level job, of course. All right. I think, let me talk a little bit about our guarantee and our warranty. Our warranty means that if you don't select somebody in the first go around, and again, I'm going to emphasize this, if we go through the entire process, and at the end of the day, nobody is ringing the bell loud enough for the board to feel comfortable, I'm going to strongly advocate that you don't select. And let us go back out again and find the right candidate. I would much rather take the extra time to resource and to bring you another slate of candidates than to select a marginal candidate where you're not happy with the performance of that individual and they leave after 11 months, 12 months, and we have to then come back out and repeat the search at that point, and the organization has suffered in the meantime. So I'm going to strongly advocate you don't select. And so my promise to you is that we'll continue this process until we find the right candidate. That's the warranty. The guarantee, of course, as I said, is that if for some reason this candidate leaves for any reason in the first 18 months, we'll be back to do that search again at no professional fee. One of the things that I might recommend, and this is a cost item for you to think through, is when we get down to the top 4, 5, 6 candidates, and especially if those candidates are from out of town, I might recommend spending the extra money to bring spouses in, the trailing spouse, because I know I had this problem once when I was the city manager. I hired a really top-notch finance director from the Midwest, and he came out and interviewed well and took the job, and his wife and family came out, and 11 months later, he came into my office and said, "Greg, I've taken a job back home again." I said, "Well, what happened? What's wrong?" He said, "Well, my wife really never came out initially and left all of her friends behind, and had I known what I know now today, I wouldn't have taken the job." And so I strongly recommend that. These are oftentimes family decisions. So if you can afford the money to bring the extra trailing spouse out. But in any case, no matter if the person leaves the job for any reason, we'll be back to repeat the search at no professional fee.
So
Yeah.
Greg,
Yeah,
Commissioner Tupper here. I'm going to drill down a little more on what you're talking about before that last little bit there, and that was if we're unable to find a candidate the first go around, how would you, I imagine we would amend, our expectations a little bit on our end on what we would ask you to look at, but how do you think you would find another candidate? How would you broaden or deepen your pool? I mean, I would think right up front, we would be casting as wide and as deep of a search as we could. So how in that instance would you change things up to find another candidate?
yeah, good question. There's 2 components there to think through. Number one is the slice in time. Sometimes it's different. You'll get a different candidate pool based upon a different slice in time. Number 2, it could be the market's telling us that the compensation range isn't appropriate. We've seen that also. So those are all things we would have to examine. If we needed to go broader, if we needed to advertise, let's say for the moment, based upon the discussion with the board, we decided to do an 11 Western states approach and craft our marketing to really target those areas. We would get all of the PUDs, cities, electrical utilities identified in those areas, send out direct mail to each of those. Okay, if that didn't generate the candidates we're looking for, well, one is the compensation. Maybe we can change that. 2, or maybe we need to go further east and continue a broader net. But all of that is a ongoing discussion that we would work together with the board on.
Okay, Greg, I have a question. Did that answer your? Okay, under your work plan and approach on, you talk a little bit about compensation review, and there's a sentence in here, second sentence under developer review and approve detailed recruitment. You say, if requested, we will assist in reviewing the position compensation and will make recommendations that are consistent with comparable agencies in the market. And I wonder if you could maybe just talk about that a little bit, given what has been provided so far, how you would engage with us in terms of, are we targeting the right salary from the beginning, or just give us a little feedback on how that would go.
Sure. It's a great question. I know you have a strong HR director here who is highly competent, and I suspect she has a pretty complete list of comparable agencies that we can work with, and probably has already done an assessment as to what within those comparables, what the salary range could look like. I'd like to review that and take a look at it. boy, today's market right now is probably as unique as I've ever seen it. Had we done your search 6, 7 years ago, I anticipate we would probably have gotten 45 to 50 applicants. In today's market, I'll be happy if we get 25 to 30, maybe less. And what has to be accurate is the compensation has to be right, perfectly calibrated, or else people won't apply. That's just what we're seeing in the market right now. Two, sometimes when you do a professional compensation analysis based on comparables, it still may not be enough money in the range to entice someone to leave a really good job for a better one. We're finding that. And so we would want to look at that and probably talk a little bit about the range to make sure it's accurate, and we think that would attract the best quality of candidates for you. That's a bunch of weasel words because I haven't seen the data yet, but I'd want to sit down and look at it and at least give you some opinions.
Okay. Thanks, Greg. Other questions?
I guess one question that came up in our previous was, how much are you going to look internally? What's your process for our internal side of things?
Strongly recommend anybody who thinks they're prepared and ready to apply. 100% recommend, encourage that. We would then evaluate internal candidates along with the external candidates fairly and objectively, and lay out what we believe the strengths and weaknesses are of each candidate who applies to the board. The board then can then evaluate and decide, who they want to move forward and who they don't want to move forward. If unfortunately an internal candidate who applies does not get selected to move forward, I really don't recommend doing a courtesy interview. I really think that if you're going to interview somebody, give them the respect that they could be selected if they interview. If it's just a courtesy with no chance of being selected, it's a better process for us and to then sit down with a candidate, the internal candidate, and talk about where their strengths were and maybe where the areas are they have to strengthen their portfolio of experience to be competitive for a job like this in the future, and to help them really, craft a game plan to get more experience so they can be competitive, and really help them understand that. We've had a lot of success in helping internal candidates understand sort of who they were up against, what the experiences were of the other competitors, and where they had to grow a bit internally to be more competitive.
Great. More questions from staff or commissioners? Not seeing any. So I think we're ready for your closing argument or any.
That's right. Well, I don't know that I have a lot more to say other than the fact that we're very excited about wanting to work with you. We love the public sector. We love what we do. One thing I didn't mention about our guarantee is if in the last 89 searches or 90 searches we've done, we've had one repeat. So I have a lot of confidence in our process. The consultants that we hire, Dave being a prime example, are all previous practitioners with extended periods of service with each of their agencies. Dave retired from Pasco as their city manager, after 8 years? Served as the public works director for 2 different agencies. And this is typical of all of our consultants. So we hope we were selected. We would look forward to it, and we'll be waiting on pins and needles to hear what your thoughts are. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
You're welcome. And I guess one thing I said, I didn't know if you heard or not. Do you folks have any questions for us since we're all here?
Actually, I don't know that I have anything. Melanie and I had a chance to talk a lot, and so I really believe that I've got a sense of it. And I know you're supposed to ask questions right about these processes at the end of the day, but But I'll be honest with you, I don't know that I have anything that we haven't already done research on and tried to prepare for. So thank you.
Well, thank you all very much. I enjoyed your presentation, and it's really nice to get to know more about your firm and the services you offer and your expertise. So we appreciate you reaching out to us and offering your services, and we will duly consider everything you've said and provided.
All right. Hey, listen, either way, best of luck, okay? And all the best to you and the PUD. We wish you nothing but the best, okay? If we're the right firm, fantastic. If we're not, that's okay. We'll lick our wounds and still wish you the best, okay? So
Well, enjoy your weather. It's probably better than ours. It's pouring rain on us. So
yeah, we're all set for the next next amount of rain. So anyway,
okay.
take care.
Going here.
Thank
Thank-
you.
See you.
Thank you. Doug.
Bye-bye.
Can we take just a little 5-minute break? I need to use the restroom, and then we'll come back. So stop the recording and we'll be back. Okay, we've taken our break and we've finished with our first consultant team. We've been able to reach out to the second consultant team, and they will be ready at 10:05. But between now and then, I wonder if anybody would like to share thoughts. We kind of did this last time. I guess my first thought was, I thought Greg Prothman's response to the use of personality tests was really interesting. And I think he articulated perhaps what Ken was alluding to, are issues with those, and the statement he made about you tend to bias towards personalities you're more comfortable with. I thought that was really interesting.
That's what the research says.
Any other initial thoughts?
Well, yeah, I found that kind of interesting too, but I look at it as, and again, at the end of the day, we're going to have to make an offer to one of these firms, and we'll get to kind of a la carte pick and choose maybe some of the things we want them to do or not to do, and that could reflect in the cost. I don't know.
Sure.
So I think the more tools we have at our disposal, it's up to us to determine how valuable and how to weight those in the process.
Right.
So to me, it's kind of a non-factor in a lot of ways, because like I said, I think we can craft this the way we want it to go. So
Right.
more tools they have that they can work with, if that's something they think it helps them to get to a larger group of finalists, that's what it's about for me. Is I'd like to have a big group of finalists, not a
Right.
small group of finalists.
Right. I guess some other thoughts I had were, Commissioner Collins and I went through the prior search a few years ago, and I think the Prothman group is giving us a very different indication that, again, as Dan's saying, maybe we should apply to anybody we use. That if we get done and we're not happy with any of them, it's like chance to reload, figure out why we didn't get the candidates we wanted, because that search to me felt like we kind of settled, and we weren't discussing going out and getting more.
And that was another thing that kind of concern is the wrong word. I shouldn't say concern. It caught me off a little bit was that, looking at the way he said, I would think that we would utilize like bringing spouses in.
Mhm.
I think that's something we should decide up front, what's in our best interest to find candidates and entice candidates
Right.
to come. And he kind of like, we're taking a bit more of a minimal approach to start with rather than a holistic
Yeah.
approach. So concerned is the wrong word, but it caught me off that we wouldn't throw all our effort right out the gate.
I think it's also a reflection of when you look at their work, they're working more regionally, they're working with all sizes of jurisdictions, and they might not really know our flavor of what's our comfort level in how much expense we're willing to go through to hire this next general manager. And they might be used to places where they have to kind of sell that idea. I think with us, it'd be like, duh, yeah, bring the spouses, because if you don't get the spouses vote, that person's got a veto and they're not coming, or they're not going to be happy or whatever.
So if I can make a general comment,
Sure.
I don't think that if we searched a whole bunch of additional recruiting firms, I don't think we're going to find anybody more professional than what we've just seen.
Interesting. Well, like I said, I was impressed with the answer on the personality test, because that just showed years and decades of experience and reflecting on what tools are the best tools. The other thing I liked was their comment about if you get to the end and you're not happy, and then the whole thing about we'll give you a recommendation on ones, and if you pick somebody we recommend, we're good for 100. I guess 180 days is only 6 months. For some reason, that sounded bigger to me. I wrote down in a year and a half. It's like, so my math
No, it's
wasn't
18.
right.
18.
No, it is a year and a half. Okay, so I got the 8. So yeah, a year and a half guarantee. That's pretty big deal. That stands out from the other ones we're looking at. And I thought that they handled well the question about internal candidates, and they jumped immediately to, two important points. Don't just give your internal candidates a courtesy interview if you don't expect to give them a shot. And they're looking at it in terms of how's it going to affect that internal candidate's view of themselves. And they immediately jump to sit down with them and explain to them what things they need to do to make themselves more ready. So that was a very quick pivot, and I think they nailed the key issues there.
Well, again, it was process too. So way I took that was they probably wouldn't even entertain an internal interview until they already had a fairly good response from outside the utility, and they would weigh the internal candidates' credentials against that pool to make that determination. So I think it's a matter of timing is what it sounded like to me as to how they would go about it.
And I'm sure that would be partially up to us too, and how we felt about things. Okay. I don't know that I have anything to add. We got a couple.
Well, there was one other thing
Yeah.
that came up in that interview there that it didn't come up per se in the first interview, and that was they referred to several times recommendation or advisory groups. I know we're going to have a certain amount of staff as an advisory group, but I'm not exactly sure what they might be looking at there. Is that something they want us to determine how broad of input we're going to take, or did they have a recommendation? I guess I probably should have asked them a little more clarification on what they thought the process would be.
Yeah.
So again, that comes back around to, how we're going to set this up with whoever we finally make the offer to. I would imagine that.
Yeah. Well, it looked like they were open to kind of whatever process. I mean, they talk about the stakeholders.
But I guess, again, that's a discussion we need to have
Correct.
at some point as well, as to, what are those things going to look like?
And we kind of talked about this a little bit yesterday when we asked Kevin about the transition team, and Kevin indicated his view of the transition team was getting staff ready for this transition. But I think there's also this other bit of how is staff going to be involved in this interview and selection process. That's something we haven't talked about yet, but we probably should at some point. Okay.
Well, I guess
All
one more thing along that line of thought, and this is something the board will have to discuss at some point along the way, and that is, as a transition, for continuity, how is this new hire going to integrate with the city, with the county, with the port, all the different things that our current general manager has to go to? So are we going to take input from those entities? Right. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying this is something we need to think about as commissioners, is how we want to gather the information for a transition for whoever because that person coming in is going to need to know those things of
I would say no.
What those relationships are going to end up being for this position. Yeah,
I would say no, but I think taking them around and helping to introduce them would probably be a good courteous.
Well, I think that's what the reception there, both firms referred to having a reception, and I don't know who we would include in that. That's my point.
Interesting. Okay.
It could hurt you to bring in too many people with potential people you're going to interview.
Well, and there's also the concern about confidentiality being blown because no way of guaranteeing that word would not get around and hurt someone in the process.
Right. And I started thinking about the ICG meetings, and I'm like, no, I don't want to bring that kind of energy into this. Is complicated enough.
But it brings up points of thought that we as commissioners, the three of us in particular, need to be thinking about all these different things that are going to go into this as when we just determine the firm and what our priorities to them are going to be.
Sure. So.
Joel.
Yeah. Just on that, I think, when you bring the candidates in and their spouses in an interview situation, I mean, I agree there's a question about confidentiality and protecting that all the way around. But it's also sort of the one shot you each have to, evaluate them one-on-one, evaluate their you know, their how they relate to each other. And if you invite the whole community to that, you may miss something or miss an opportunity. Just my thought on that.
Like dilution, you know.
Just to be clear, I'm not advocating for that.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's good to talk about these things. All right. Well, we're at 10:06. Melanie, just can you tell us who we're going to be talking to so I don't use the wrong name this time? Last time I went off the agenda and that was not the lead person.
So Chris Guiney from
Okay.
Carter Baldwin will be joining us.
Okay.
And he should be on shortly.
All right. Well, just stand by and let him know we're ready, however you can do that.
Okay, we'll do.
Yeah, really good questions. And like I said, I appreciate how staff has, you know, arranged this 2-day process because it feels like we've been able to take appropriate time with each team and then kind of develop our process as we're going. So I really like this so far. Hopefully they didn't make a promise they can't keep about being ready for me. If so, I will want to go to executive session instead.
now.
Okay, yeah, start bringing them up and then we can do a rolling start with them once they have everybody. Cause we have called them out of time of when they expected to be. Hello there. Do we have Chris or
muted?
Carter online there?
Chris is there. Is he muted?
Okay. I think you might be muted, Chris. Wait, keep working on it. We'll let you know when you still can't hear you. Nope. Do we have him muted on our end?
About now.
There
Yes.
you go.
Yeah. So Chris, thank you so much for coming a little bit early.
Yeah.
And take your time in getting everybody online that you need. And when you have them all online, you have a green light to go.
And Chris, this is Melanie. You don't have any team members joining you today, is that
No,
correct?
just me.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. So if you're ready, feel free to jump in. Chris Guiney is joining us from Carter Baldwin today. He is our third executive search firm that the board is interviewing for the general manager search. So Chris, if you are ready, please jump in.
Okay. Third of three, I hope. I hope I'm last. Anyway, it's nice to meet everybody. How is everybody? So just a couple of key things before we start. I don't usually paint my walls red. I'm in a hotel. So please don't judge me on the red hotel room walls. And secondly, I've got 2 bars of connection on my Wi-Fi here, and I hope that doesn't become intermittent for any reason. So and anyway, thanks everybody for having me. I really appreciate it. My name is Chris Guiney. I must first start by saying Melanie's done a wonderful job of coordinating all of this from our side. So I just wanted to give her a lot of kudos for the work she's put into this. There's a lot of ways we can do this. And let me first start by saying I'm most comfortable with you raising your hands, asking questions at will. I'd rather it not be the talking show. From my standpoint, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts at all, please jump in. But I'll just start. So now I have my presentation handy and can certainly use that if need be. But I just assume can also talk through everything that we do as well. So whatever is easiest for you. I assume everybody's got the presentation that we submitted in front of them, correct?
I've got it.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, I'd prefer to see your faces, so I'll just kind of walk through the deck and kind of start from there. And if anybody has any questions, you know your name is your buzzer. Go ahead and jump in anytime you're ready. So a couple of things. Again, my name is Chris Guiney. I'm a partner with Carter Baldwin. We are an executive search and leadership advisory firm. I'm one of the owners of the company. I lead what we call our energy and infrastructure practice. I also lead our board of directors practice. But from an energy and infrastructure standpoint, I've been in the energy business for, I think it's 34 years now. I started my career climbing utility poles when I was very young. I did not like that. I'm a big guy. I'm about 6'4" and 240 pounds. And you get up to the top of those things, and if you've ever been on one, they start to move and shake. And I don't like heights. But I love the industry, learned a ton, maybe learned a little bit more from the guys than I should have at that age, but got hooked right away. So it was a blast. And I've been in the industry ever since. I've been in the electric utilities and telecom utilities industry ever since. I lead executive searches for a variety of organizations, but they mostly include electric and telecom cooperative utilities. I have worked with scores and scores and scores, I guess I can say hundreds at this point, of electric cooperatives and telecom cooperatives, but also with large investor-owned utilities and municipal utilities as well. I've been in the business long enough where I've actually brokered purchase of municipal utilities. I've led consulting in engagements for a variety of utilities. And so I've kind of been all over the industry. And so this wacky world of executive search is by far the favorite thing that I've ever done. It's my life's work. I love every single second of it. So I'm really glad that you've invited me, and I really appreciate it. A couple of things about Carter Baldwin. We've been in business for a little over, I think it's 26 years now. And one of the things that's really important to us is you're probably, and I don't know who you've spoken with, but you probably have had an opportunity to listen to search firms talk about process and talk about all the different steps and things that you go through. And all of those are important, but that's not what's going to differentiate a search firm. And I think what we do is we bring a very different approach to how we execute searches, but really where it matters most to me is it matters in the industry engagement and the experience that the person that's leading the search has. That said, it's me. I'm your guy. I have a team, of course. You see it in the presentation that I sent, but I lead the search. I'm involved in everything. I'm involved in every single phase of the search. So that includes the initial analysis that we do. It includes the research. It includes the candidate development. Of course, once those candidates are deemed worthy of getting to me, we go through a series of interviews. We'll go through all of this. And then ultimately, I work with you very, very closely to help you select the next candidate. That's important. What I want to emphasize there is it's me, and I will be there every step of the way, including when you're assessing these candidates, so that I can help you either stay on track to the competencies and criteria, which we'll talk about, that you said you wanted, or we can start to talk about where the variations lie and why that might or might not be important for Jefferson County. So just wanted to frame that up. Was there a question?
Yeah, Chris, this is Commissioner Tupper. So since you've started on a little bit here about how you're going to work your team, I don't want you to be at a disadvantage. Since you're the only one presenting today, we've had a little bit of exposure to other teams.
Okay.
And I know an important component to this group is to know and understand all the people that we're working with. So if you could maybe give us some background on who that team is.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're the point, and you're going to be leading the team. We get that. That came across really strong. So can you talk a little bit more about your team and the team that will be working with us on a day-to-day or regular basis?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay. So I'm going to start with the heartbeat of our team, and her name is Beth Miller. She's our search coordinator. I've been working with Beth for over a decade. She is by far my eyes and ears. She's amazing. She keeps everything on point. She keeps everything scheduled. You'll find her, in my opinion, to be one of the best customer oriented people that you'll ever meet. She's incredibly detail focused, and she is engaged in everything from candidate management all the way into assisting you with logistics and really anything that you need administratively. But she coordinates our entire team. So while I lead the team, nothing would happen without her. She's amazing. Number two, we have two elements of our research team. So Tatum Preston is one of the executives of our company, but she also leads our research organization. She'll be directly involved, as well as one of her key researchers. And so Tatum is again, she's been working with me for many, many years. So she's very, very detailed and knowledgeable of not only the electric utilities industry, but also the nuance of those utilities and what candidates look like and how to go out there and find them. And we'll talk about what we'll be looking from you for. Also, you'll find one of our consultants engaged on this project. It might be Rodney Anderson, it might be Greg Hart, but either of those two gentlemen I have a lot of electric utility and cooperative experience and work with me directly. Now, they're a bit of what I like to call the tip of the spear. So they're the folks that are going to go out there. So this is really interesting, and I'm going to diverge on the description of the team for just a second. But what's important about executive search, I think what you'll hear from a lot of organizations where we are different is that organizations will say, well, we'll collect applications, or, well, we have a database, or, well, we have a lot of folks that we know. I've been in this industry for 34 years. I would argue I've probably been in and around the industry in all forms and shapes as much as anybody. But the fact is, the candidates for you aren't necessarily going to come from a database or from candidate pools or applicant pools. The candidates that we're looking for are the best candidates we can find. And that means most of the time they're passive. They're not actively looking for a job. They're probably not going to submit an application. They may. It's not to say we won't find that person. But we're looking for folks that fit the competencies and criteria that you're looking for in the culture and environment that's ideal. That said, it's our job to go out there and find those people. It's not their job to come to us. So that consultant, whether it's Rodney or Greg or Mike Little, that consultant is tasked with going out and finding those people based on the research that Tatum and her team developed. And that's a really interesting difference in this industry. We choose to do the hard work. We choose to not be lazy. We choose to really go after candidates that are going to be best for our clients. And, there's a saying in the electric cooperative business, if you've ever heard this, but once you've seen one electric cooperative, you've seen one electric cooperative. Once you've seen one PUD, you've seen one PUD. They are not the same. And there are nuance and differences amongst all of them. And we have to find out what those are and apply those to the candidate pool that's most appropriate, not just say, well, there's a big pool out there. If somebody comes to you and says, there's 30 people that could do this job, that's just lazy. That's not true. There's nuance to each of them, and we'll narrow that down, but it's going to.
Oh, oops. Those 2 bars.
He just needed that one more bar.
His
That's
2 bars became 1.
Yeah. If we can text him or something. Yeah, he's totally gone.
Well, having been on that end of it, I understand it. It's just hit and miss.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And even dropping your picture off the screen sometimes just doesn't help either. So. But we have enough time today. So.
Yes.
You may have to drive to the nearest cooperative and get some bandwidth.
Do we have a way to text him?
Yeah, I can text him.
Yeah.
He's working on it right now.
Okay. I mean, if he just wants to go to phone, and we could even pull up his slides, if that would help.
I am texting him right now.
He's coming. He is on the phone now. He will be on the phone.
You gotta what, *9? What is it to unmute?
Yeah, well, let those guys.
*6 mute 9 to raise your hand.
And Chris, we see you're on your iPhone. It is, you press *6, you'll unmute your phone. My apologies, *9 to unmute, right?
No, *6.
*6.
*6 to mute and unmute.
*9 is to raise the hand. Okay.
Okay, how about now?
We can hear you.
Good.
So, Chris, we lost you right when you were waving your hands. I don't know what you were saying. That's what froze.
Can you see me?
No, we can't see it, but that's okay. We all have your presentation up, and I'm just kind of like jumping from slide to slide with your presentation. So I think if we're all comfortable with that, just go ahead.
Yeah, you were at, if
All
you've
right.
seen one PUD, you've seen one PUD.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. So sorry. And fortunately, you've seen one of me, and that's probably enough for you to see. But all right. So thanks, folks. Sorry for this. I really thought we'd have better Wi-Fi here. I'm in a hotel, and I don't know why it's not good. But yeah. So the point there is that these organizations are different. You're different. You're not like other PUDs. Now there's things that are unique, right? Or I should say similar to some. But for example, RCW 54, right? That's something that has to be very mindfully discussed and thought through for Jefferson County. Geography, something very, very thoughtful about who wants to be in this area and who wants to be in this region. Legislative issues, regulatory issues, all of those are different, unique, but more important than all of that is the strategic direction that the committee wants to go. And what aligns philosophically with the leadership style and the ideals of the right GM candidate, the right leader for the organization. And none of that comes from a wide pool. It has to be sought. It has to be discovered. It has to be analyzed and assessed. So that's going to move me. I should say the last part of our team, let me finish that up, is you're going to meet our candidate coordinator. Michelle Smith is amazing. She is literally responsible for handling and care and feeding of all the candidates. Believe it or not, we find that it makes a massive difference to maintaining and retaining candidates throughout the process. So that's our team. I love them all. They're amazing. And we feel very, very strongly that you won't find a better team out there. They're very experienced. They're very knowledgeable, and they'll be just as excited to see as I would. But let me go into process a little bit. So obviously, I would need to spend time with each of you. I'd want to understand both collectively and independently and confidentially what you're looking for. I do think it's important to have confidential discussions. And the reason is because having those confidential discussions allows me to truly understand what's in your heart about what you think the next leader should embody. Now, I will consolidate all of that feedback into a summary report that doesn't necessarily attribute a comment back to a particular committee or board member, but it does allow us to be honest with one another. What's really important? What's important for Jefferson County and what's important for this board? And then we'll get in a room and we'll talk about what that criteria is. Now, we have to think about it in what I call 3 dimensions. I think the first dimension is experientially. Where have they been? What have they done? Successes, failures, not uncommon to what other search firms might tell you and what they might do, but important nonetheless. The second component, and I do think there's a difference here, is you have to look at what kind of a leader you're asking to bring to the table. And that's important. Not what have they done, but where would they like to go? What is their philosophy for leadership? What's in their heart? Are they growth oriented? Are they maintenance oriented? Are they very, very strong people leaders? Are they very strong metrics oriented leaders? And understanding what the right fit from a leadership standpoint is just as important as experiences. The third dimension is the most important, in my opinion, and that's the culture fit. Not just what's culturally right with this board, of course that matters, but what's culturally right for the constituents, what's culturally right for the staff, what's culturally right for the region. Analyzing all of that takes a lot more work than what you might normally think. And we're not afraid of that work. In fact, we feel like we have such a strong track record of stability in our placements. That's the reason, is because we spend time with them, understanding what's right for them, not just what's right for you. It's got to be good for their lives, for their families, for their future. You want somebody there that 8 to 10 years, well, they're going to spend a good portion of their life with you. Let's make sure this is the right fit. So identifying and documenting those competencies and criteria allows us to build everything which we'll work around. That doesn't mean we're locked in. It means if we're collaborative and we calibrate consistently through very, very interactive communication, we can change those criteria as we go. but we have to have a North Star and a guiding point to get to. And that's important. And so, I feel like in over 30 years of spending time in this industry, I feel like I'm pretty good at understanding what a lot of that is. And obviously I want to help you figure out what those ideas are, but it takes individual.
Chris,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah, excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Collins,
Hi,
can
Chris.
you talk a little bit about the process of understanding organizational culture?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there are a couple of things. Now, number one, if you have any, we'll call them customer engagement surveys, staff engagement surveys, if you have anything there that is sort of poked out as either problematic and or beneficial, I really want to understand what that data says. I'd also like to get a good idea of understanding what boots on the ground say. So in my opinion, and I don't know what your relationship is with your outgoing GM, but anybody that's on the executive team that can help me get a good understanding of that is important. Remember, we talked about those individual conversations with commissioners and with board members? Well, I would also share the feedback from those conversations with staff as well. Let's talk about culture. Let's peel any ugly band-aids that might be there off, and let's really figure out what exists. Is there a cultural issue? Look, I've been in this industry so long that I can remember very, very well that there was absolutely no sex appeal to knowing the utilities industry. We are now in the most exciting time we've ever been in. It's incredible. The transformation that we are all going through is unmatched in any industry anywhere. And so that makes a difference to culture. It makes a difference to where you want to take this organization and how you want to get there. It makes a difference to the people that are looking for the services that they're hearing about every day. And so we really need to understand and spend time evaluating from as much as we can from the customer side, from the board, from the staff. What is our culture? Are we able today to move forward toward that transformation? I don't know. Maybe we're not. Maybe there's a real development issue with the staff. Maybe you have an incredible staff and we need a leader that's going to get them to the next level. We just have to spend time thinking through that and talking about how culture can help the organization be better. It is so often overlooked. It's amazing. People underestimate cultural impact all the time. You've all heard culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture eats organizations for an appetizer. It's amazing how important it is. And so we have to spend time digging into that. I want to be mindful of time and not to speak too much, but I'll stop there for a moment.
You're doing good. And because you started early, it's okay. So keep going.
All right.
Yeah,
All right.
without your team here, the more insight you can give us about the entire process, the better.
Yeah. Okay. So you want me to get into process now?
Go wherever you want to go.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about the conversations. We come up with criteria and the competencies. We spend time. We agree on that to the extent that we can. And I don't care if we have to get in a room and fight for 2 days. We have to come out with those competencies, and I'll guide you. Now, why is that important for me? It's not only important to help navigate what kind of candidates we look for. It's also important to help me keep you on track. So not to get caught off by some shiny objects. And there are shiny objects out there, really appealing candidates who have incredible backgrounds that don't necessarily align with the competencies and criteria that you're looking for. I've seen it all the time. Boards get captivated by that. I'm going to do my best to not let that happen. And if it does happen, at least you're aware it's happening. But of course, we build a profile. You hear about that all the time. We want that to go out. Now, here's where it gets interesting in this process. You can hear people all the time say, well, we're going to, I don't know, put out a press release, send out a blast, send out to our robust database. Well, look, that database argument went out when the internet got really big. We all have the same databases. We all have access to the same information. I would argue that our personal information of the candidate pool that we have is more robust, but I can't validate that. What I do know is this. It takes effort to go out and find these people, not just collect the information or the applicants. And so based on the criteria we discussed, and all of the competencies, all of the cultural considerations, geographical considerations, compensation, all of it, we're going out and we're doing the legwork to find candidates that might fit. Again, probably passive. It's not to say we won't find somebody that comes to us and applies and gets the job. It happens. But most of the time we find candidates that are passive. Why? Because they're happy, they're engaged, and they're successful. Well, we want that person happy, engaged, and successful so they can be happier, more engaged, and more successful at Jefferson County. So we go out there, we interview these folks, we test for everything from chronological history in their careers to motivation. We obviously are limited to the questions that we can ask from a legal standpoint. So we try to dive in as much as we can. Like every good search firm, there should be plenty of background checks. We do Google and social media verifications. I think a lot of people forget to do that. I think that's important, especially in a public utility environment. There are plenty of people who have a public persona and who have made public statements. We dig into those, trying to understand what somebody is thinking. Doesn't necessarily mean we're trying to understand, whether they like to hunt or go knit or knit or whatever their hobbies are, although we could find some of that out. But it is important to find out if somebody maybe has been widely panned or widely lauded for a potentially a very controversial position. And do we want to bring that kind of a person and that kind of controversy to Jefferson County? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but it matters. So we look at all that. We like to think that we not only look under the rocks, we scrape the moss off and look further. So once we go through that, if those interviews, that series of interviews that goes through our consultant, if they do well and they fit within the parameters of compensation criteria. Now, by the way, I should mention, we don't share compensation early. In fact, I almost never talk about compensation until the very, very end. I don't want anybody being motivated to this opportunity because of compensation, so I don't share it. But if they fit in the parameters of what you're looking for, in addition to all those other things, they come to me. If they come to me, then we have a series of interviews that I spend time with them on. Also, administering those competencies and criteria against the candidate. So talking about everything from motivation and personal decisions all the way into specific career highlights and lowlights. And then, of course, talking about how they navigate themselves in the competency environment that we've already established. If they get through all of that, then we establish our long list. You get a long list. We don't know what that number will be. Might be 15, it might be 20, it might be 25. We'll see. And then, of course, we get together in a room all at once. You get a big package of information with all the information we just discussed. And hopefully you have pre-read that before we got to the table. And then we talk about all those candidates, every single one, in a room together. Me, you, and my consultant will come and spend time doing that to really give you not just the information on who these people are, but the color of how they interacted with us. And so there's some subjective and objective assessment there. You then decide who you want to move forward with. We go through a first round of interviews. Those interviews are largely conversational. I like to think that they're, and by the way, I suggest, I should say, that you spend a good amount of time with each candidate. A couple of hours. I like to think it's a minimum of about 2 to 2.5 hours per candidate. And whatever that short list is, if that short list is 7, 8, whatever it is, you just have to be ready to know that that's going to be a long couple of days. But this is the most important decision you as a board will ever make, and I'm sure you're okay with that. But we can customize the process any way you like, of course. But I really believe that you need to spend a lot more time rather than less with these candidates because, again, 8 to 10 years, we've got to make sure we do this right. Once you have those discussions, you narrow that down to what I'll call finalists. We don't know what that number will be. That's up to you. But this is where it gets so much fun. When we get to the finalist stage, now we start to really put them through the paces. And I don't believe in just interviewing people. I believe in challenging candidates. I believe in challenging them on a number of fronts. Number one, I believe we should challenge them for their acumen. What are they capable of? Do they have the experience? That's easy. We can ask them lots of questions around that. I believe we should challenge them on their desire and motivation. Do they want this? Why do you want this? What's important to you, to your family, to your spouse? Number three, I believe we should challenge them and their leadership capability. This is where I love to do what I do more than maybe anything. I don't know if anybody's a Star Trek fan, but there's an old concept in Star Trek called the Kobayashi Maru. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, I think we have some kismet here. But this essentially was a no-win situation for the Starship Enterprise. And so I only tell you this in having a little fun here. But what I like to do is I like to do something similar for candidates. I like to say, let's create a challenge on the fly. Now, we created it beforehand, of course, but we deliver it to the candidates on the fly, and we see how they react. That doesn't mean there's a right or a wrong answer, but it gives us an indication into what kind of leader they are. So while we've asked them to respond to other questions, what would you do in this situation? What would you do in that situation? We give them prepared questions to come in and present to. We then give them, so let me break this down how it works. Let's say we have 2.5 hours. For the first 40 to 45 minutes, we ask the candidates, all the candidates that are finalists, to present to the same questions, apples to apples comparison. And let's see how they do. And we're going to ask them to present to you at a dais or at a podium in front of you and see how we like their persona, how we like their presentation style, how we think they'll do in front of stakeholders and constituents. And we have an apples to apples comparison. We take a break. But just before you head to the restroom, we give them this challenge, this Kobayashi Maru, this challenge response. They don't know what it's going to be, but they have 10 to 15 minutes to review it. And when we come back from the restroom, we ask them, what's your response? So let me give you some examples. I had an electric cooperative say, we had an explosion at one of our plants. We know there are injuries. We don't know how many, and we don't know where everybody is and whether they're safe. How do you respond? So then you say, okay, what happened? So do they call the media first? Do they call the board first? Do they call the FBI first? Do they call, emergency services? What do they do? I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer, but it gives you an indication of what kind of leader they are. I've had somebody say there's an active shooter in the building. How do you handle that? I've had somebody ask, okay, we have a regulatory issue coming up very, very soon. It could potentially hurt our rate case in a big way. And oh, by the way, we've got this capital investment that we have to make, and we're at risk of losing some of our capital on this project. We have an aging infrastructure. How do you invest in an aging infrastructure when we have a restricted balance sheet? There's a number of ways we can do this. But I love the idea of challenging a candidate as a leader to see how they would perform real time, because that's real world. It's not just prepared statements in a prepared environment. So that's a part of the process. And then at the last phase of the finalist presentation is open Q&A. And it's a long day, but it's a lot, and it's a lot of feedback. But I really like to dig into who candidates are and what they're all about. So I've spent too much time on that part of the process, but I thought it was important for you to know. Once we go through that, of course, we start to have deliberations, and I guide you and I say, remember, these were our competencies and criteria. This is what we observed through the interview process. But ultimately, you have to come to that decision. And then, of course, if you need assistance in negotiation or anything like that, I'm available all the way through. Now, we're not done there. One thing that I believe is very important is I believe that it's my responsibility and Carter Baldwin's responsibility to stay engaged to the extent that the board would like us to. So I commit to having regular and consistent communication with the candidate and the board for up to a year post-hire, so that we can identify whether or not there are any issues that exist and hopefully alleviate those. Let me give you an example. I did this once for a big generation and transmission cooperative in the East Coast. And the candidate said, everything's great. The board said, he's doing great. Everything's wonderful. Come to find out, the candidate hadn't sold his house yet in the Midwest. His wife was very unhappy that they hadn't sold their house. She was missing her husband. There was a lot of tension. Well, the board wasn't necessarily going to pay for the house to be sold or pay for any fees associated, but they were able to accommodate the wife on some additional trips back and forth to make her feel better about seeing her husband. It alleviated a lot of stress. They sold their house. It came to a really nice conclusion. It's those kinds of things that people sometimes call onboarding. I call that relationship building. And I think it's important to make sure that the person that you have and you're bringing in isn't just all about work, but their life is being stabilized, not just their work environment. And so I commit to being involved to the extent you want me to be. You may say, Chris, go pound sand. We don't need it. We're good. That's okay too. So,
do you have any questions? Chris has been going quite a while.
Oh, he's on a roll. Let him go.
Let him keep going. All right.
I'm gonna be on a roll. I want questions.
No, you roll, man.
All right. Okay, here's what I'm gonna dive into now. You guys came to me, by the way, thank you, Melanie, again, with some really cool points. Priorities determined. You wrote down priorities determined by the Board of Commissioners for general manager candidates. And I want to talk to some of these, and I can talk to all of them if you like. Someone with a proven track record of mentoring and developing management level staff. That is gigantic. I will tell you that the one thing that I see most as a gap in utility leadership, doesn't matter the size, it could be IOU, it could be cooperative, it could be municipality, is succession and development planning. At a minimum, my theory on this, I've actually written an article on this, but I believe every single board meeting should have, just like you have a safety moment, you should have a succession moment. We all know things happen, good things and bad things, and you lose candidates or you lose people. We need to make sure that we're keeping an eye on, remember, succession and development is not a one-time event, nor is it a one-person event. It's enterprise-wide, which would obviously require a lot of Melanie and her team's assistance, and it's ongoing. It has to happen consistently. So, Commissioner Collins, you may say, Mr. or Mrs. New GM, how's our succession going? 5 minutes. They may say, well, Sally's doing great. Joe has dropped a little bit, but we know we have to get Joe training over here. Okay, great. We need to see movement. We need to see succession planning. So I think what you're asking for is critical. By the way, it's not something that you can speak to from a textbook. You have to have been there and done that and known how to do it. So I know how to assess for that. In fact, I used to lead succession planning for a company called Hydrick and Struggles many years ago. So that's something we'll test for quite a bit. Excellent.
Chris?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Are you suggesting that we discuss employee performance in an open meeting?
I'm suggesting that the GM has that plan and makes it available as needed to the board consistently and regularly. I don't know that you need to have the discussion in the open meeting. I do think that on the occasion when you either enter into an executive session and or you have the opportunity to discuss a succession, in other words, it shouldn't be a secret to you or anybody on the committee. It should be something that you understand very, very, in a very detailed fashion, exactly who's available to succeed who and what the timeline is to get them there if they're not currently ready. So I'm suggesting that this is a key element of the performance of your GM and something that you should measure the GM by, among many other things. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent communicator, of course. I get that. I love this too. Someone who has built a team building culture in the organization he or she has worked at. So important. One of the things that I loved, if any of you remember years ago, there was a book that came out called The Black Swan. And it was kind of this very fascinating book that everybody sort of galvanized around and said, wow, what a cool concept. Well, I would argue that the industry we're in right now has black swans flying all over the place. There's more of them. There's a flock of them, and we can't keep up with them. The key here is that the transformation that this industry is going is extremely hard on the industry, right? Traditionally, this is an industry that hasn't been one known for change. Change is hard. Change is difficult for staff. if a staff is going to go through change, chances are they're nervous and they're unable to really see what the future looks like without help. The right leader will come in and understand that culture is a big deal. We have to make sure that we're nimble and we're able to accommodate the change and transformation in the industry, the customer value proposition, the balance sheet implications, and the investments that need to be made. And all of that is hard. And that's a part of building culture, is creating an environment where it's okay for people to do their best and to try their hardest and bring ideas to the table, because we need them now more than we ever have before. And so I think it's really important to understand if somebody has been in an environment of change like that before, if somebody has built that kind of a culture, if somebody has created an environment where people feel safe and rewarded and challenged and feel like they're playing a role in an innovation and a transformation that, again, hasn't been seen in, the likes of in decades. So I love that one too. Strong financial management background, of course. I absolutely agree. It's now more than ever, especially balancing the P&L of a public utility district that's not just focused on utilities, electric utilities, but also has telecom and broadband and wastewater, all important. I'm going to go down to one bullet here on below where you say knowledge of the budgeting and operation of electric utility is necessary. An understanding of wastewater and telecom services is desirable. This is such an interesting trait, and it's such a rare one to find in this segment, because a lot of times in a lot of cooperatives or IOs, even in IOUs, or despite the fact that they're public, or especially in municipalities. And this is why I would say you can't keep your aperture open just for municipal executives. If you're talking about broadband, if you're talking about water and wastewater, and you're talking about a growth environment, growth is not the word that a lot of folks in this industry have known to accommodate. It's been, hey, safe, affordable, reliable, right? That's what we do. But guess what? It's not the only thing you can be focused on anymore. You have to be focused on how to accommodate all of these new services. If you've got renewable energy requirements, if you've got broadband requirements, if you've got, oh, by the way, there's a big pool of money coming out. What do we do with that? How do we add value there? How do we deliver that value to our customers and our constituents? So I do think that it's really important to find somebody that has a broader perspective than just running a municipal PUD in the traditional sense. Now, that's not to say they don't have these skills. I just think we open up the aperture. We look at cooperatives. We even look at potentially, this is a cultural issue, but we could look at investor-owned utility executives. Now, we know what kind of money they make. We know that's probably out of the realm of possibility. But if in their heart they have a servant mentality, if they believe they want to do something of the greater good, it's not out of the world possible that we could find somebody to fit here. I'm just saying, let's keep our eyes and ears open to all the possibilities. And I may be way off, and you guys may all be just saying, cut this guy off, but I'm just giving you some general data here. And then we talked about guiding. See, there it is. There's the bullet, right? Identify a manager who has deep experience guiding utility through a period of transition. That is the most docile way of saying transformation as I've ever heard. And it's so important. I mean, we've got to amp it up. Like, we've really got to look for somebody that's going to guide this organization through not just a period of transition, but a period of transformation, not just from an industry standpoint, from a people standpoint, and generally from a financial standpoint. So that all takes guts, it takes experience, and it takes somebody that has a real gift of moving people to the place where they need to go. That's leadership. So it goes back to our 3 dimensions that we talked about earlier. Finally, I love this, and I have to ask this question. Identify a manager who, with a professional degree in engineering, accounting, law, and then in parentheses, really, with an exclamation point. I'd love to hear more about that. Are you looking for a lawyer? Are you looking for somebody are you looking for a law trained engineer that has an accounting degree and also is really good at HR? Well, we might as well put a horn on their head and a purple squirrel on their back, but we'll do the best we can.
Do we want to
That
respond
was
to that?
something of an inside joke.
Oh, okay.
Unicorns are just running wild everywhere, right?
All right. Well, listen, again, you tell me what to go look for, and we're going to go look for it.
So on that topic, Chris, several minutes ago, you talked about reaching out to people who are in place. How do you go about identifying who to contact? I mean, you're talking about the whole universe of people working in municipalities, public sector utilities, as well as investor-owned. That's a very, very large landscape to cover.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you, what do you use to guide yourself before making a phone call?
So we don't. Yeah, that's a great question. Let me emphasize that what I'm talking about is maximizing the breadth of the aperture we're looking for. It's not necessarily saying all of the municipals or all of the cooperatives or all of the IOUs at all, right? So let me give you an example. Again, I hate to keep harkening back to this, but I've been doing this a long time. There are so many organizations that do not have a single person that's a potential fit for you, because I know who they are and what they believe in, what their type is. What I'm saying is that we need to understand who you are, what you're looking for, what's important to you, what does success look like, right? It's one of my favorite interview questions, which is if we're here 24 months from now and everybody is ecstatic about the performance of the GM, what happened? What was successful? What went right? If we can understand one of those, that scenario, we're going to look for organizations that have been through that type of an environment. If, for example, you have significant legislative issues facing you specifically, we need to look for organizations that have faced those kinds of things. If, for example, you have serious challenges with managing your P&L or your budget or your ability to deliver, in a not-for-profit effective way, let's look for folks who have navigated through that. We think, through our experience, that we have a really good idea of the landscape of the industry, which means we can automatically wipe out lots and lots and lots of organizations who don't look, feel, or sound like Jefferson County wants to look, feel, and sound like. Therefore, we start to narrow it down from there. Then we start to look. And remember, where did I say was the most important? It's culture. Let's think about that for a second. Could we find somebody from, could we find somebody from Dallas, Texas to come to Jefferson County? Maybe, probably not. Could we find somebody from, I don't know, Albany, New York? Maybe, probably not. So we really deduct or deduce, I should say, what we're looking for, starting with culture. And we try to identify as much of that as we can. And then we get into leadership. And then we look at experiences, because I do think it's that order that carries the importance of your GM. And so what I think you'll typically see in the industry is people start with experiences first. What looks the same? What sounds the same? And maybe we do start with that. I'm not saying we don't, but I would argue that it's more important to really think through the culture, the leadership elements, and then finally check the boxes on the experience side.
Okay. Chris, I wonder if you could, we've kind of bounced around a little bit and you've covered some really unique perspectives that I think your firm would bring. Can you maybe kind of wrap up the process that we would go through, and then maybe we could go to some questions?
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about having the candidates, the finalists, go through this analysis, where they present to you, they have their challenge response question, and then there's open Q&A. We can come up with a number of different tools that allows the board to assess, the committee to assess what is important and stack rank that and all of that. But, obviously deliberation is always important, having open, honest discussion amongst yourselves about, there's also feel, right? Who felt right? Who made you feel good? And so we want to make sure we have that discussion. We want to make sure that everybody's sharing their feelings about what they think is right. Now, I don't know if you have any bylaws around the selection of a GM. In other words, if you need a majority or a supermajority, or I don't know that. We'll examine that and understand that. But we work toward that. And once we have a decision, ideally, it's unanimous. I think we all would want that. We all would want an environment where a candidate feels exceptionally well regarded and supported. If we can get there, we bring that candidate on board, and you have an opportunity to really find something that's unique. And then, of course, you go through the negotiation process and you make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And then you start thinking about whether there are things like relocation and whatnot. And you set a start date, and then you start to produce communication around a press release. You want to share good news, and we can help you with all those things. And that's where our process ends. And then, of course, what I mentioned earlier continues, which is the ongoing support for both you and your candidate.
Okay. I'll ask a question. It sounds like you have a lot of confidence in terms of being able to bring a pool of candidates to an organization that they will then have one or more people that they would have really been happy with, and they make an offer and they get them. But what would happen if we went through all this and either some of them dropped out before we could make them an offer, or we just weren't happy with, we weren't feeling really good about any of the candidates we had?
Yeah, well, it does happen. People are people. This is a people business, and sometimes people drop out, and it's not because of anything Jefferson County was or wasn't. It's, personal reasons and things like that. And we respect that always. So we do the best we can to try and unearth those issues so that they don't come up, but it can happen. And if it does, then we make sure that we still have a robust group of candidates. The latter, though, is a bit more important to discuss, which is you're just not happy. If for some reason you get to a point where you just don't see the person you want, we keep going until you do. We don't stop. We make sure that you have those candidates. If we get to the end and you don't have your person, we continue through that. Now, we can try to avoid that with the sheer numbers of candidates that we bring to the table, and I would argue this. And by the way, that's never happened to me. So, but if it does, we deal with it and we move forward and we continue. My job is to help you find this person. My job is not to bring people to the table and watch this thing fizzle out. So we're going to make sure we do the best we can to kind of bring that person to the table. Now, of course, if there are circumstances that none of us can see, or there's, I don't know, some massive level of, there's a civil war amongst the committee, and we'll have to adjust all of those things as we go. Again, very, very rare, but we can discuss all those as we go. The bottom line here is, if you, and I do see your hand up, Commissioner Collins, so we'll get there. The bottom line is, if you have an iterative, collaborative, highly communicative process where we're calibrating consistently, we should have a really good idea of whether we have the right candidates or not. And that's just experience and a willingness to succeed in this process that has to take over. And I'm going to do my very best to hold you as accountable as you're going to hold me.
Okay, Ken.
Yeah. So, Chris, other search firms offer different kinds of warranties and guarantees. If we hire a person and within the first year, we wind up having to let them go because they haven't performed adequately, then what?
Yeah, so we have a 6-month guarantee. Now, assuming that termination is for cause, we can go to 12 months. And so I don't have any problem with that.
So Chris, Commissioner Tupper.
Hi, Commissioner Tuber.
So we've saw some other firms talk about methodologies to determine personality and things like that. You have the predictive index. In your presentation. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, great question. I love that. So have you guys anybody ever taken the predictive index? I can't see everybody, but
Our HR person raised their hand.
Okay, I'd be curious. I bet they loved it. I hope they did. Did they? I don't know. I can't see them.
Well, she's going to answer you here.
It was a good experience.
Okay, good. Oh, that's Melanie. Oh my gosh. Okay, cool. I've done so many of these things over the years. Miller Hyman, the INTJ, ENTP, all those things, right? I have found, and we are certified at administering and evaluating predictive index. And that does matter. You have to be certified to really understand how to administer it and to evaluate it. I have found that the predictive index is the best tool for this industry because it is essentially a tool that allows somebody to understand what the most likely behavioral the most likely behaviors will be in a given situation. It's not a guarantee. We're all people. It's impossible to guarantee anything, but it's an excellent predictor of how somebody will behave in a given environment. And it's quick and it's highly accurate and interpreted correctly, including interpreted with the knowledge of the board. The board can manage and lead people recognizing that either I'm okay with those predictive behaviors or I'm not, but it's your responsibility to understand those behaviors and respond accordingly. Equally, if I were the new GM, I would ask each of the board members to take the predictive index because I think leadership requires a good knowledge of each other. And I think if people understood how each of us made decisions and behaved in certain ways, we would be able to lead together more effectively. That's the ideal scenario of using the predictive index in a GM or CEO context where the board is evaluating it. It's excellent in that environment. Not used in that way, it's just another assessment of an individual, just like every other assessment. But I have found that it's been extraordinarily valuable to boards who decide to pour themselves into, okay, we understand this is their behavior style. Now let's recognize that when we present this issue or we tackle that challenge, we know this is what to expect. How do we then manage as a board, and how does that GM manage with us in kind, so that we all understand where we're coming from? So I'm a huge fan of it. A huge fan of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one. So one of the things that we've talked about with other consultants is the issue of internal candidates, whether we have any, whether we don't have any, what that means, whether we have some, but we decide they're not ready for that kind of position. What's your approach on internal candidates?
This is my favorite question. Okay. This is so big and so important and so often overlooked. So one of the most, and I think it's in the presentation that I sent, you should have some information in there. One of the things that's really important is there's two concepts to an internal candidate that are really important. Number one, treating every internal candidate the exact same way you treat any external candidate. In other words, inclusive in the process, holding them accountable for the same requirements, So a lot of people say, well, we'll add a cover letter. Well, I don't believe in cover letters. I believe in letters of interest, meaning I ask for candidates to provide a detailed analysis of why they would be right for this job. It's okay that they don't know what they don't know. We recognize there's a lot of unknowns there, but we really want them to understand, or we really want them to put thought into why, or at least we'd like to see them put thought into why they think they'd be right for this opportunity. We ask internal candidates to do the same. Now, this gets interesting. I'll get into why that's interesting in just a second. But up until the point that the candidate is either A, rejected from the process, or B, gets the job, they are treated just like every external candidate. Now, if they are rejected from the process at any of those stages we talked about, I feel it is my responsibility to treat them far above and beyond. In other words, I offer to the board, and the board has the choice to accept this or not, to come and in person interview each of those post-rejection, interview each of those candidates and give them personal coaching on how they can improve, where they may have stumbled, and what things they can work on to get better. If a succession and development plan is enterprise-wide and it's done with intentionality, that feedback that candidate, and by the way, the candidate can choose to accept that or not, of course, but if that candidate gets that feedback, that coaching feedback can then be brought to HR and the new GM so that a development plan can be improved for that individual. In other words, we really want them to feel loved and cared for because they matter. You know, it's the old adage, what do you do if you don't train, or, you know, what's worse, training some person and they leave, or not training them and they stay? In this case, we're suggesting if they don't get the job, let's give them more development. Let's make them better. Let's improve their capability.
Expenses for travel aside, is that service included?
No cost. That's just me traveling. That's all. But it's important, right? You know, we want these people to feel, we want you to know who's, first of all, there's got to be some sort of a reward for somebody to have the guts to step up and say, I think I can do it. Whether they're qualified or not, we'll figure that out. But that reward is development. Thank you for having the courage to stepping into that environment. Now let's reward you with some knowledge in a professional manner of where you can improve for the next time. And that makes them ideally a better Jefferson County PUD employee.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
More questions, or have we?
So yeah, more of a generic question, I guess.
Sure.
You seem pretty intuitive. You researched this or not, you seem intuitive for sure, and you've got some insight into the industry and other things. You've mentioned RCW 54. We're also an RUS borrower. I'm just looking at how things are going to play out down the road if we select you on determining the candidate requirements and those sorts of things. Some of these, I hate to use the word detriment, but it's going to shrink the pool. How do you see your approach to those two particular things, the RCW and us being an RUS borrower?
Well, first of all, it should shrink the pool. That's the point, right? We don't want all those people who aren't the right fit for us. As you know, being an RUS borrower is so much different than being CFC or CoBank. I mean, these are very different organizations with very different strategies and philosophies. I know all of the, well, I shouldn't say I know all. I know a lot of the executives at each of these institutions. RUS is dramatically different in its philosophy and strategy than CFC and CoBank. When you look at RUS, it's important to find somebody that understands. So I want to be careful. I'm not suggesting that RUS is right or wrong. I am suggesting that understanding all of the governance and all of the nuance of RUS borrowing is thoroughly examined, because it may or may not be best for Jefferson County. The right candidates will come to the table with an open mind and potentially ideas on more creative financing opportunities to fund and continue invest in the transformation that we've already talked about. So finding folks that maybe have zero experience with RUS isn't necessarily a bad thing, but having that experience and additional experience is something that allows us to cull that pool down and say, okay, talk about what you've done. Now let's think about that in another way, right? So what if you find a candidate who is out of the box? You say to me, Chris, we're open to out of box candidates. We're open to, I'm open to somebody that's, I don't know, run a high tech firm. Not saying you would do this, but I've had this happen. And I'd say, okay, let's think about that. Are you also open to the massive culture shock that person might bring when they start to bring innovation and ideas to the table, especially to potentially an environment of employees and customers who've never seen that level of innovation? If your guts can stand it, then maybe we should look at those candidates. But the idea here is to use those kinds of data points, RUS and RCW 54, to narrow the pool such that those things are important to you. Now, if they're not that important, right? And let's be careful. It's not that candidates can't learn RUS and RCW 54. That's not the case at all. We just want somebody that is pragmatic to their approach to dealing with those. Oh, sure, RCW 54, what's that? Okay, well, let's talk about that. They go back, they do their research. You know what? I looked at it. It's very similar to what I did here. And here's how you handle something like that. So what's not important is how thoroughly detailed they are in these things. What is important is how conceptually capable they can be, knowing that these are nuanced and highly important components of Jefferson County. And so I think that's where the conversation of candidate analysis comes into play. So, and again, I don't know who you've spoken to or what you've done, but somebody says, oh yeah, okay, great. We'll go look for somebody that has experience with RUS. I don't think that's the question you should be asking. I think the question you should be asking is, do you have any experience with RUS? And if not, what's similar that you can help us learn from? The greatest gift that a candidate can bring to this committee is to help you learn and get better yourselves. Somebody that can bring value to the table that you've never seen before. Somebody that can make your participation in this even better. It's the Michael Jordan effect, making everybody else around you better. And so I think it's important to have somebody with the right criteria that you're looking for, but it doesn't always mean they're mandatory, I think. Again, you can violently disagree with me on that, but I'm of the mindset that I'm going to try and bring you an outstanding candidate. That's not to say I haven't had customers come to me and say, you know what? I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to do anything differently. Just find me safe, affordable, reliable engineer type, and we'll go that way. I can. It's boring, but I can.
Any more questions?
Just trying to think if there's anything else we need to ask. We asked others.
Okay.
I think we've kind of hit the top.
I think we've covered it pretty
Commissioner
well.
Randall, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Chris, this is Melanie. I have a logistical question for you.
Sure. Yeah.
Are receiving applications from candidates, do you use your own applicant tracking system or do you typically have clients use their own ATS?
So good question. I'm going to give you a terrible answer, a consulting answer. It depends. I would want to talk to you further about what your system is. I actually look, the reality here is once we put this thing out on the wire, we're going to get a lot of candidates that aren't qualified. And so if there's some value in the care and feeding of candidates from Jefferson County's perspective. If in fact you have a system that's workable, we're happy to do it ourselves too. So, it bifurcates the candidate pool a little bit because what we have is we have people that are inbound and people that are, being pursued. So it depends, Melanie. That's a terrible answer. But we have a system, you have a system. Let's just figure out which one is the right solution.
Okay, no, that's a helpful answer. Thank you.
It's Commissioner Tupper again. So I guess a couple follow-ups here. I don't know if I didn't see it in the presentation. Did we get any sort of references from placements that you've done other organizations? Do we have any of those? Okay, Melanie shaking her head. Yes, I don't know that I saw those. Was it in the presentation?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but in your proposal, you did provide utilities that you've worked with in the past.
I did. I provided utilities, cooperatives, municipals, whole host of folks.
I remember one of them was PSE.
Was it? Oh, okay. I must have missed that.
Dan, it's on page 11.
A lot of
Okay.
pages in that.
Okay. And then the second one was, is there a chance we could get a little bit more in-depth background on your team?
Sure. Now I think I included slides on each of them, didn't I?
Yeah, but I was going to
Yes.
say maybe far above and beyond that.
Sure. What? Yeah, happy to. Anything you want. They would love it. Is there anything in particular you'd like, or I just want to get you what you need?
No, like I said at the start of the meeting today, you know, that we're interested in the people we'll be working with. So those pretty simple bios, maybe a little more, because this, you know, I see this coming down to be a really tough decision for us. And the more we can know about your team, I think maybe that helps your efforts. And, you know, I think we're going to pursue the same thing with the other applicants as well, as trying to figure out the people that we're working with. You know, the more we know, the better.
Okay. Yeah, I'll get you something. I don't know what yet. If you don't mind, give me a little bit to think on that, but I'll do that as quickly as I possibly can.
Yeah, if that's fair. I don't know how the board feels about that, if we have enough information in that regard.
Well,
or
I
not.
guess, have you read the?
I read the ones, yeah, I read and he mentioned a couple others that weren't on the
Yeah.
bio. So again.
So I guess I would clarify, if there's anybody else that you would have us working with, if you could send us those bios.
Okay, I can do that. That's easy.
Okay, Joel, did you have a comment or a question?
I did, if it's okay. Just what, you know, given your experience, by the way, I serve as general counsel to the PUD here. And my question is, how long do you think this is going to take? Just given your experience, you know, all of that, what's a good estimate of a timeline? And secondly, a kind of completely different question. Do you think there are regional differences in candidates, utilities, and all of that?
Okay, let's go to the second question first. Yes, no question about it. Legislatively, regulatorily, philosophically, culturally, no question. Absolutely. Which is why I talked earlier about cultural differences. It's gigantic, absolutely gigantic. We can go into that in as much detail as you like, but yes, absolutely. The first question about how long, what I would ask, I'm going to ask you a question before I answer that, which is, what's your, when would you like to have this person start?
We basically have our current general manager through kind of the June, July timeframe is what we've talked about. Although I think he's willing to work with us if we do our best possible process and we're still not done by then.
So assuming that this committee or however you're going to assemble a search committee, and forgive me, I don't know, is engaged and available, and please don't take that in any other way than a pragmatic approach to the process. Assuming that the committee is engaged and available, I have no reason to believe why we would extend beyond that time.
Okay.
Now, if and I have to say this, remember I said earlier, you'll hold me accountable and I will hold you accountable as best I can. If dates slip, if things move, if you know, that's when you start to reevaluate timeline. And I hope that doesn't happen. It can, but I get the sense that this is a serious group of people that are committed. And if that's the case, we're going to be fine.
Okay. Ken?
Yeah, Chris, I'm sure you won't mind sending us also, you've got an impressive list of people that you've worked with. Can you give us 4 to 6 specific references?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. I'll work on that here in the next day or two, if that's okay.
Great.
Yeah, I was looking at that list more of people you work with to get information more than as ones you've done searches for. Sorry about that.
No worries. No worries. Yeah, happy to.
And to the Board of Commissioners, are you okay with Chris sending that over to me?
Yes. Yeah, please work.
Yes.
Yes. So Chris, you can send that list over to me.
Okay, we'll do, Melanie.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Well, Chris, did you have anything you wanted to close with?
I don't know that I don't know that I have a big closing, soapbox moment here, but I guess what I'd like to do is ask a question. Have I covered what you feel you needed to hear to get a good idea of whether you've got to feel like we're a fit. You've got to feel like I and my organization is a fit for you. And you can talk all day about process. You can talk all day about, what nuance here or what nuance there, but it's got to feel right. You've got to feel like there's the right intentionality and the right focus on results. Did you get enough of what you need to make that assessment?
Ken's head is nodding. Dan's head is nodding. I feel like you did a great job, and I think you distinguished yourself in what's kind of unique about the services you offered, and I think you've answered all our questions. So
Yeah.
I think you've done a good job.
I think generically at this point, this is about all we could go through. We could spend a lot of time really getting down into the weeds, but that's more of a secondary conversation, I think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Well, if we work together, we're gonna be cutting a lot of weeds down for sure, and that's fun stuff. But I just want to make sure that you're getting the value. This is valuable time for you. I want to make sure you're getting the value you wanted out of this. I appreciate the time for that all of you afforded. I am so sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm in a hotel in Portland, and I guess we're getting some weather. I don't know. Maybe that's the situation. But I will tell you this. I don't know if this matters a whole heck of a lot, but there has been a tremendous amount of my work over the last 5 years has been up in this part of the country. And I live in Atlanta. I travel a lot. I always have for many, many years. But I get it. I understand it. I've spent a lot of time all over the coast, inland, and I know this area really well. It is different. It really is. And you have to understand that to attract candidates. You can't try, for example, somebody said, is it different around the country? I think Joel, you might have brought it up. It is different, and it does matter. Whoever you choose, make sure that the emphasis is on culture. You're asking for somebody to be here for 8 to 10 years. That's not out of the realm of possibility, but is definitely more of a rarity than it's been in the past. If you're going to be successful doing that, you've got to focus on culture and fit more than anything else. You've got capable people that can teach the business, or at least the history of the business. You've got a capable board of trustees. You've got good people here that can teach somebody the nuance of the organization, but you'll never be able to teach whether or not the person is somebody you can work with and they like it there and they want to thrive there. Focus on that first. I can't overestimate that enough. It's just a gigantic issue. So, the competencies, the criteria, the skills, the experiences, of course we want to look for that, but it's that fit piece that is so important. And when you find somebody that's happy to be there, it's amazing how much good they can do. So I put a tremendous amount of value on that. I really do.
Great. So Chris, we've directed Melanie to do some checks on references in terms of organizations you've worked with recently to help find people for. So we've asked her to do that, and then we've kind of set ourselves a date for, did we say the first week of January, that we're going to come back pardon me, January 7th, we're planning to come back and kind of gather that information and then deliberate and hopefully select a consultant.
All right. Well, to everybody on this call, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season. Take some time off and enjoy your families. Melanie, I'm a 24/7 guy. You can call me anytime, holidays or not. Feel free. But I just want to thank everybody for the time. Really enjoyed it.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Take care, everybody.
Rolling with the punches on the communications, and that's something that we appreciated, Jefferson County.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks, Chris.
Do we need a little break before we go into our exec? I'm guessing 10 minutes. Ken wants a break. Okay, let's do a 5-minute break. We'll come back.
5 minutes is fine.
An executive session. Okay. And until Ken. So we're off of our break. We were just going to do a few impressions of the last consultant. We're still waiting. Oh, there he is. Ken's back. So Ken, I just wanted to give us the chance to do any impressions of this consultant like we have with the others before we go into executive session. So if anybody wants to share anything. I think
I'll start.
You might be muted. I'll let Dan go first.
I think hearing from the three consultants really brought a lot more things to the surface that we need to consider. Some great ideas, different concepts. It's going to be a tough decision in my opinion, but I know Melanie's still got to come back with some information on some of the references. I don't expect to see or hear anything there because most of the references, I think, pretty comfortable with what they put out there. They're going to get good references back. So I don't know how deep or in depth we can go with, really checking out those references, in particular, and how their teams worked were a fit with those firms. Because again, like the last presenter said, if you've seen one PUD, you've seen one PUD. If you've seen one IOU, you've seen, everybody is different. So I think really at the end of the day, I said this before, it's going to come down to us. The things that we set for our goals and, and how we see this playing out and qualifications in that. I think I've heard enough from the three to feel comfortable that I can make a decision.
Ken, do you want to go?
Sure. So I don't have any trouble making a decision. I think the last presentation we got was from a very large organization. And I think Chris could sell ice to the Eskimos. I think he was extremely confident, and my concern is how come he didn't provide other members of his staff to present themselves to us. If you look at the cost, my biggest concern is we would be spending $60,000 to $80,000. I mean, they're the highest priced of the three groups, and I don't want to be spending that kind of money unless we're getting value. I don't want to spend it on reputation, on buying the firm that does work with PSE or other large consumer-owned. From what they present, and it's interesting. They could have provided any number of companies as examples that they worked with. There's only one company on that list that looks like a PUD. And they're in Bermuda. So I'll shut up. I think my preference has been stated.
Well, I think that we heard from more than one, if not all, that things are negotiable in the process, the tools that they'll use, or the way that we want to sculpt things. So again, you get what you pay for sometimes. I mean, that might apply here. I don't know. So again, I think it comes down to, like you said, or maybe I said, or it's how they're going to fit with us. I mean, who come across, whether it's a team or the individual. I think ultimately it comes down to who is going to be the point person, the most commonly used point of contact. And I think we have an idea with the three who those will be. So I think for me, a team is that it's a team. It's more important about who is at the top of the team, which is the very thing we're looking to do now.
So I hear you, Ken, and coming off of the last time we had a consultant helping us with this, I can hear your concern about smooth sales pitch. And I hear you. On the other hand, I liked what he talked about in recognizing that things are different now than they've ever been in both the electric and the broadband industries. And those are areas in our business line where we're being, we have challenges and opportunities that I think other organizations aren't necessarily dealing with. And I appreciated his focus on culture. And I think we are at a unique time where we've had Kevin here for so long and been really focused on getting our organization up and running and getting key people. And I think we are really at a transition point, and I really appreciate that we're going through this process because I think it is giving us an opportunity to look at ourselves and who we bring in as really helping us with this next phase of the development of Jefferson PUD. And I think this next phase is going to be different than the phase that we've been in to date. And we have to, I think, acquire new skills and do things differently because the challenges we face as an organization and in our county are significant. So I heard the sales pitch too, but I was impressed by the fact that he would be our lead and that he's been doing this for a really long time. And he's been doing this across a lot of electrical sectors. And I agree that we should get all the information on whoever else would be a part of the team and the roles they play and their experience and so forth. But
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I will guarantee you that he will not be the primary person that we're working with.
okay, well, I think that's, if we have that question amongst us, we need to pointedly find that out. And whether that is a hey,
In the contract.
yeah, it's like, who are we going to get and what are the hours and who's going to be coming here? Because we have this concern that and we kind and well, it's like with the prior one, they were more clear. The president was there. He's the one who leads the presentations with their business plan. He's probably the one getting the clients. And then he hands off those projects to his team. And we are concerned that the face that we saw at the organization is not going to be the face that we would see if we chose to work with them. So we need to find out, who exactly are we working with? Is it really you? Or are we going to see other people and you're just the face? I don't know how we say that properly, but I think that's
I think you say it straight up.
information we
Just say
absolutely.
it straight up. Exactly.
Okay. So Melanie, do you have any questions on that for how to follow up with them?
I don't. I think I have my direction.
Okay. Do we have anything else? All right. Well, that's interesting. We have all these different impressions, but I think that's why we have three commissioners, so that we try and cover, hopefully get to the bottom of things and use it through our diversity. With that said, I'm sorry, Joel.
Yeah, I'm sorry to, I guess I just want to bring up and maybe can talk about it later, but just the fact that on behalf of the PUD, I feel some time pressure to get this process moving. So is there any, I mean, we talked about it yesterday, I'm just raising it again. Is there any sense that you all can make a decision sooner than the second week of January? Is it worth talking about schedules and all that?
And then it was really about how long will it take Melanie to get the information back to us. So I don't know if we can do it sooner than that, given that that's the task at hand.
I don't know that anything that we're asking for is going to change my opinion on what I've seen and heard, because I put more weight in these discussions and I'm going to put in things in background information that we're going to get, unless there's something very glaring that pops up. I don't really doubt Chris's integrity on the last presentation. I think what we heard is what we would get. But again, follow up is fine. Make sure we can double check that. But I don't believe I'm going to see or hear anything that's going to change my opinion of the direction we should go.
Well, and I'm hearing Commissioner Collins has significant
And
questions and concerns
I
on the last
appreciate that.
consultant. And I was favorably impressed with the last consultant, but I take Commissioner Collins's instincts to heart, and I need some more information. So I think we should take our time with that. We should, go deep with the people. And I think one of the things to ask, one clear way to find out is to talk to these other folks who've worked with Carter Baldwin. Okay, did Chris Gurney say he was going to work with you? Did he work with you? Did you get other people? Well, in addition to what was the experience? So anything else?
Well, again, since we're picking apart each of them or critiquing them, like you already alluded to, we know today we saw, the head of the firm, but he basically is going to pass off to someone with 2 years of experience. So I think that
The prior consultant.
or the prior consultant. Yeah. So again, I think I'm listening to what I'm being told and I'm taking everybody at face value, not going to push anyone's integrity, that sort of thing. It's great to follow up. But I'm just kind of compare what kind of experience we're going to get from these firms. And, like you alluded to, culture is important. The others didn't seem to focus on culture. So again, I think I saw and heard enough. And again, it's going to come down to, is there room when we try and contract one of these firms to work with us? That will be the next step. And that's, I think, what Joel is looking at, is if we spend a bunch of time doing that and it doesn't work, then we got to move to the second one. I think the sooner we move this process forward, the better.
Yeah. Kevin. Hang on, we're having a little side conversation.
So you couldn't do it. So I think it'll take me a couple weeks to get some responses. I've already. Yesterday, but with that said, I agree with Joel. I'm feeling pressure on the timeline too.
Yeah.
But I respect that if the 7th is when the board wants to deliberate.
Well, I mean, we picked the 7th as a day. My concern is this is over the holidays. Good luck on getting these guys to respond quickly. I think the 7th is realistic. If you get everything, I mean, we can meet in 24 hours notice if we can agree to a date. So if you can get everything and you've got an earlier, date in mind, I'd say throw it at us. But for now, I'd say leave the 7th on there. Go with, all speed that you can in accuracy. But I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't take, if it's not hard. You get a whole bunch of, this is what I get. Hi, this is Bob, and I'm on vacation through January 1st, or 2nd or 3rd or whatever.
Well, and again, staying on the timeline, type of a thing. We want to honor Kevin's ability to, have the freedom to do things. We don't want to have to hold him over longer if he has other plans. I mean, again, we need to be mindful of the timeline for Kevin as well as for the utility.
Yeah.
And one of the things we heard that we're reminded of again today, at Jefferson PUD, the last consultant, I think he nailed it. We are looking for a unicorn, and that none of these firms may be able to produce what we would all consider to be the right candidate. And that's just going to push this further out. No matter which one we use, we could run up against that. So I'm just trying to be mindful of the sooner we can make these decisions, the better. I'm not saying we should rush it, but like I said, I don't know what I would see at this point that would make me change my way of thinking about who we should go with.
So I am going to encourage the commissioners to please, if you haven't already, please make some detailed notes of how you feel about these different consultants right now and what your questions are or things that you would like to discuss once we sit down and all three of us have the rest of the information, and maybe who are, order them in your mind. Here's my first pick. Here's my second pick. Here's my third pick, and why, so that when we sit down on the 7th or whenever that date is, we are prepared to fully discuss and debate. And we might not agree as to our first top three. So that means that we're going to have to kind of work it out. And I'm hoping then when it's all said and done, all three of us agree as to the pick, but it may take us some little doing to get there. So let's please do that. And if there's nothing else, I'm going to take us to the next agenda item. Are we cool to move ahead? Okay.
Yes.
Yes. All right. So our last item on this agenda, and after that we will adjourn. So there won't be any more meeting, public meeting. We are going to have an executive session on RCW 42.30.110 subsection 1 subsection G for the purpose of reviewing to review the performance of a public employee. And I propose that we take 15 minutes for that, if that's okay with everybody. Kevin has indicated that's okay with him. So we are now going into executive session. Okay, it is 12:01 and we have completed our executive session and we have completed all the work on this agenda. Had a great day today. Want to thank everybody for their involvement and we now stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.